Hello, my name is Ari Waldman. I'm a person who stutters. Today is my video Tanya, day 50. Can't believe I'm up to 50 already. Thursday, December 10th, 2020. The 24th day of the Jewish month of Kislev. It's theoretically the 25th, but for our purposes, it's the 24th. From Chabad.org. We're going to be practicing pausing. Daily study, daily Tanya, lessons in Tanya, middle of Likutei Amarim, Thursday, 24th of Kislev, 5781, December 10, 2020. V'nefesh hashenit b'Yisrael, hi chelek Eloha mimal mamash. The second uniquely Jewish soul is truly a part of God above. A part of God above is a quotation from Scripture, Job 31:2. The Alter Rebbe adds the word truly to stress the literal meaning of these words. For as is known, some verses employ hyperbolic language. For example, the verse describing great and fortified cities reaching into the heavens is clearly meant to be taken figuratively, not literally, in order that we should not interpret the phrase a part of God above in a similar manner. The Alter Rebbe adds the word truly, thus emphasizing that the Jewish soul is quite literally a part of the God above. Kamo shekatuv vayipach be'apav nishmat, as it is written concerning Adam, whose soul was a comprehensive one. A neshama kalit, in that it contained all the particular souls of subsequent generations. And he blew into his nostrils a soul of life. Ve'ata nafachta bi. And as we say in prayer concerning the soul of every individual Jew, you blew it into me. The significance of the verb to blow as it relates to the infusion of the Jewish soul is now explained. Uchamo shekatuv bezohar man denafach betochach mitoche nafach perush mitochito. It is written in the Zohar, he who blows from within him, that is to say, from his inwardness and his innermost being. Shetochiot ufnimiut hachayut sheba adam motzi benifichato bechoach. For it is his inward and innermost vitality that a man emits through blowing with force. Blowing tires a person much more quickly than speaking, as is readily observed, for requires a greater exertion of effort and vitality. Hence, the fact that the metaphor of blowing is used to describe God's implanting the Jew's soul in his body signifies that this soul originates in the innermost aspect of godliness, that the Jew is rooted in God's innermost and essential being, is indicated further by the designation of the Jewish people as God's children, whose souls originate in his thought, just as a child stems from his father's brain, as the Alter Rebbe explains presently. Kach al derech, mashal nishmot Yisrael, alu b'machashava. So too, allegorically speaking, have Jewish souls risen in the divine thought. The Jew has his source in divine thought, the innermost level of godliness. All other created beings, even angels, are rooted in and created by divine speech. Speech is external in comparison with thought. Ki dichtiv, b'ni, b'chori Yisrael, as it is written regarding the Jewish nation, Israel, my firstborn son, Benim, Banim, Ata Lashem Elohechem. And concerning Jews as individuals, you are children unto God your Lord. Perush kamo she haben nimshach mimoach ha'av. That is to say, i.e., the significance of the Jews being called God's child is that just as a child is derived from its father's brain, his inner and essential being, kach kiviyachol nishmat kol ish Yisrael nim shacha mimachashavto v'chach mata yidbarach. So too, use an anthropomorphism is the soul of every Jew derived from God's thought and wisdom. The Alter Rebbe now takes this concept, a step further. Deriving from God's thought and wisdom actually implies that it derives from God himself. As he goes on to explain, Di ihu chikim v'la b'chachma yediyah elahu v'chachmata echad. For he is wise, God possesses the quality of wisdom, but not with wisdom that is known to us, created beings, because he and his wisdom are one. Uchemo shekatav harambam, shehu hamada b'hu hayodea chulei, and as Maimonides writes, he is knowledge, and simultaneously the knower who knows and comprehends through the knowledge, and he is that which is known. God is also the subject of knowledge and comprehension, as Maimonides concludes. This means that God's wisdom and comprehension are totally different from man's in human comprehension. There are three separate and distinct components: the person's soul, the knower and professor of knowledge, the power of intellect and comprehension, the knowledge by which the person knows, the subject of knowledge, the known, such as in law, in the Mishnah, or a discussion in the Gemara, which is apprehended and known. Concerning God's wisdom, however, Maimonides states, he is the knowledge, the knower, and the known. God is the means of comprehension, the knowledge, and at the same time is he who understands, the knower, and is also that which is understood, the known. V'davar zeh ein bi cholat ha'adam lahavino al boryo. Chule. Maimonides concludes, and this is not within the power of any man to comprehend clearly. Ki dichtiv ha'chakar Eloha timsa uchtiv ki lo machshavotai machshavotechem v'gomer. As it is written, can you find and understand God by searching? And it is also written, for my thoughts and not your thoughts, says God, and consequently your human thoughts cannot possibly comprehend my thoughts. Since his wisdom is one which God himself, as has been shown, it follows the Jewish soul, which stems from divine wisdom, as stated above, actually derives from God himself. Many Jewish philosophers rejected Maimonides' description of God as the knowledge that the knower and the known. In fact, they considered it erroneous to ascribe to God a description of any sort, even of the lofty level of intellect, of which Maimonides writes, inasmuch as description implies limitation, and God is inherently limitless, the Alter Rebbe therefore points out in this note that the Kabbalists agreed with Maimonides, with the qualification that his concept does not apply to God's essence, for his essence is truly infinite, even higher than the inscrutable level of knowledge that Maimonides refers to. God cannot be defined in terms of knowledge, since he transcends it indefinitely. Only after God limits the infinite light of his essence through the process of tzimtzumim, progressive contractions, and thereby assumes the attribute of chokhmah, wisdom, only then can it be said of God that he is the knowledge, the knower, and the known. V'hodu lo chokhmei ha-kabbalah k'mo shekatuv b'pardis me ha-ramak. The Kabbalists have agreed with him that God can be described as the knowledge, the knower, and the known. As stated in Pardes, Rav Moshe Cordovero, V'gam lefi Kabbalat ha'ari zichrono livracha yatziva milta. For even according to the Kabbalah of the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, of blessed memory, Maimonides' statement stands. The Kabbalah of the Arizal provides an even deeper insight into the limitlessness of God's essence, higher than even the knowledge, even that level of knowledge to which Maimonides refers. Still, even according to the teachings of the Arizal, Maimonides' statement is acceptable, with one proviso, however. This is so only when applied to the mystic principle of the clothing of Ein Sof light by means of numerous contractions, tzimtzumim. In the vessels of the Sephirot of Chabad, an acronym for Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, respectively. The triad of Sephirot, which represents divine intellect of the world of Atzilut, emanation, Besod hit labshut, or Ein Sof Baruch Hu, al yedei tzimtzumim, rabim bechelim, the Chachma Bina Da'at Da'atzilut. Through a process of self-limitation called tzimtzumim, contraction, God manifests, or in Kabbalistic terminology, clothes, his infinite essence, referred to by the Kabbalists as the Ein Sof, the endless, infinite one, in the Sephirot, which are his attributes. This manifestation occurs first in Atzilut, specifically in Chabad of Atzilut. Divine intellect, thus, at the level of Atzilut, God can indeed be defined in Maimonides' terms of knowledge, knower, and known, i.e. intellect. Ach lo lamala meha atzilut, but not higher than atzilut. Above the world of atzilut, the unknowable God cannot be defined accordingly in terms of the Kabbalistic scale. Maimonides has nothing to say about God except from the world of Atzilut and down. Uchemoshe katuv b'makom acher she'ein sof baruchu miromam umitnase romemut ein kates lamala mala me mahut uvichinat chachma bina dat. As explained elsewhere, the Ein Sof, blessed be He, is infinitely exalted over and transcends the essence and level of Chabad. Ad she mahut uvichinat chachma bina dat nechshevet be'asiya gufanit etzlo yitbarech. In fact, the level of Chabad is regarded as being equally inferior as material action in relation to him. Kemoshe katuv kulam bechachma asiya. Thus it is written, you have made them all with wisdom. You have conceived them all with wisdom. Would seem more appropriate conceiving. Not making is surely the proper function of God's wisdom. You have made them all with wisdom indicates, however, that to God, wisdom, the highest level within the worlds, is as lowly as Asiya, the lowest level. The Alter Rebbe now addresses a difficulty arising from his previous statement that every soul emanates from divine wisdom. Since all souls emanate from one source, supernal wisdom, it should follow that all souls are of the same level and rank. How then do the various levels and ranks follow in Jewish souls come about? Ve'af sheyesh rivavot mine chilukei madregot baneshamot gavoha leal gavoha leel kates. True, there are myriads of different gradations of souls, neshamot, rank upon rank, ad infinitum, kamo godel, ma'alat nishmot ha'avot, Moshe Rabbeinu Aleichem HaShalom, al nishmot dorotenu, ela de'ikve mishicha. For example, the soul of the patriarchs and of Moses, our teacher, are by far superior to the souls of our own generations, which belong to the period preceding the coming. Literally, the heels, i.e., the footsteps of the Messiah. Kmo godel ma'alat nishmot ha'avot, u'Moshe Rabbeinu Aleichem HaShalom, al nishmot dorotenu, ela de'ikve mishicha. Shehim bechinat akevim, mamash legabe hamoach ve'harosh. For the latter souls are like the very souls of the feet in comparison with the brain and the head. Just as the life force found in the soles of the feet cannot possibly be compared to that found in the head and brain, so too can there be no comparison between the souls of these present generations and those souls here called the head and brain of earlier generations. V'chein b'chol dor v'dor yesh rashi alfei Yisrael שנשמותיהם הם בחינת ראש ומוח לגבי נשמות ההמון ועמי הארץ. Similarly, within each generation, we find the same disparity among nishamot. There are those who are the heads, the leaders of the multitudes of Israel, so designated because their soul are in the category of head and brain in comparison with those of the masses and the ignorant. V'chein nefashot legabe nefashot ki kol nefesh klula mi nefesh ruach u'neshama. Likewise, there are similar distinctions between nefashot and nefashot, the soul levels of nefesh. For every soul consists of nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Just as the soul level of neshama varies from one Jew to another, so do the levels of ruach and nefesh. Thus, we see how manifold are the differences in the ranks of souls. Accordingly, we would expect similar variations in the divine sources. The greater the soul, the higher its source. Mikol makam shoresh kol nefesh ruach neshama, kula mirosh kol hamadregot ad sof kol dargin hamelubash beguf ame haaretz vikal bikalim. Nevertheless, the root of every nefesh, ruach, and neshama, from the highest of the all ranks to the lowest being those souls embodied within the illiterate, and the most light-minded of light-minded Jews. Nimshach mimoach ha'elyon shehi chachma ilah kiviyachol. All are derived, as it were, from the supreme mind, which is chachma ilah, supernal wisdom. In order to help us better understand why the levels of individual souls vary so widely, despite their common source, the Alter Rebbe now returns to the analogy of a father and son, used earlier to illustrate the description of Jews as God's children, who are derived from Chachma Ilah, God's brain, as it were. An explanation in brief in the analogy: the child's entire body is derived from a drop of semen originating in its father's brain, yet many physical components which constitute the child's body are by no means uniform. They vary greatly from the brain, the highest component, to the nails of the feet, the lowest. These radical differences come about through the presence of the drop of semen in the mother's womb during the 9 months of gestation. It is this period of physical development that produces the differences between one organ and another. The more materialized a particular component of the drop becomes, the more it diverges from its original state and becomes an entity with its own unique physical characteristics. We thus observe that through all the organs share a common source, nevertheless, in the process of development, there arise differences as radical as that between brains and nails. Another matter evident from the analogy: through the nails are the most insignificant part of the child's body. they are still bound and united with their first source, the father's brain. For like the other parts of the child's body, the nails too received their nourishment, life, from its brain, since the child's brain remains the essence of its source. The father's brain and is thus constantly bound to its source. Even the nails are therefore bound up with the original source. The same is true regarding souls. All souls are derived from the same source and not from Chochmah Law, but the soul must descend therefrom from a multitude of worlds and levels before clothing itself in a physical body. It is this descent that creates changes in the soul's level and differences between one soul and another. For one soul is affected by this descent to a greater degree than another. The second aspect of the analogy too applies here. Although a soul may descend to the very lowest of levels, it is still bound up and unified with its original source in Chochmah Law. In the analogy, the nails remain bound to the father's brain through their unity with the son's brain. Similarly, these souls of the lowest level remain bound to their source in Chochmah Law through their attachment to the souls of the righteous and the sages of their generation, from whom they receive their spiritual nourishment, even when in this physical world souls of a higher level, analogous to the child's brain, retain the spiritual level of their source, the level of head and brain, and through these souls, even the souls of lower levels remain bound and unified with their source within God. This briefly is what the Alter Rebbe goes on to explain. Kimshal haben hanimshach mimoach ha'av shafilu Tzipranei, Raglav Nithavu Mitipa, Zo Mamash. The manner of the soul's descent is analogous to a child who is derived from his father's brain. Even the nails of his feet come into existence from the very same drop of semen which come from the father's brain. How then were the nails created from it? Al yedei shehi yaita tish'a chadashim beveten ha'em v'yarada mi madrega limadrega lihtanot ulehithavot mimena tzipar nayim. By being in the mother's womb for 9 months, descending degrees by degree, changing continually, until even the nails are formed from it. Though the child's organs all derive from the same source, the drop of semen which comes from the father's brain, yet they develop into entities as radically diverse as the brain and the nails. V'im kol ze odena kashura umiyuchadet biyichud nifla ve'atzum b'mahuta ve'atzmuta harishon shahaita tipat moach ha'av. Furthermore, although the drop has been so altered as to become the substance of the child's nails, yet is still bound and united in a wondrous and mighty unity with its original essence and being namely the drop of semen as it came from the father's brain. V'gam achshab babein yanikat hatzipar naim v'chayutam nimshechet mehamoach shebarosh. Even now in the son, the nails receive their nourishment and life from the brain that is in his head. The nails derive their life from the child's brain, which in turn retains the substance of its source, the brain of the father. Thus the nails, too, are bound up through the brain of the son with the father's brain. Evidence is now brought that the nails remain bound to the father's brain. Kid ita bagemara nida sham loven shemimenu gidim v'atzamot v'tzipar naim, as is written in the Gemara, nida ibid, from the white of the father's drop of semen are formed the veins, the bones, and the nails of the child. According to the Kabbalah, too, there is a connection between the nails and the brain, as shall be presently stated. Uchemoshe katuv be'etz chayim shar hachashmal besof levushim shel adam harishon began Eden. In Eitz Chaim shar hachashmal, it is likewise stated in connection with the esoteric principle of Adam's garment in the Garden of Eden. Shahayu tziparnaim shebechinat mi bechinat moach tevuna. That they, the garments, were of nails derived from the cognitive faculty of the brains. Of the brain. V'kacha mamash kivyachol b'shoresh kol hanefesh ruach u'neshama shel klalut Yisrael lamala. Exactly so, as it were, is the case with regard to every nefesh, ruach, and neshama in the community of Israel on high. The soul, too, is changed from its original state by a process of development similar to the gestation, which transforms the drop of semen. In the case of the soul, however, this process consists of a descent from world to world and from level to level. Within each world, as mentioned briefly above, the Alter Rebbe will now go on to state the details of this descent. Specifically, the soul passes through 4 spiritual worlds in its descent from supernal wisdom to the human body. These worlds or stages in the creative process are in descending order: Atzilut, the world of emanation; Beriah, the world of creation; Yetzirah, the world of formation; and Asiyah, the world of action. They are written acrostically as Abaya, pronounced Abiyah. Abiyah. The function and significance of these worlds will be clarified further in the Tanya. For the moment, a brief explanation will suffice. Atzilut, emanation, is a world where the Ein Sof radiates, so that Atzilut is, in effect, godliness, itself transplanted, so to speak, to a lower level. This takes place by means of simsumim. For this reason, Atzilut is still united with its source, the Ein Sof. These two characteristics of Atzilut are indicated in its very name. The word Atzilut is etymologically related to two roots. A, the verb etzel, meaning to delegate, as is the verse, I, God, shall delegate something of your Moses' spirit and place it upon them, the 70 elders. The verse is saying that the spirit of prophecy possessed by 70 elders was merely an extension of Moses' spirit, not something new and separate from him. Similarly, the properties of Atzilut are extensions on a lower level of the Ein Sof. Atzilut is also related to the word Etzel, meaning near, thus indicating the unity of Atzilut with its source. The world of Beriah, creation, as its name implies, is a creation, not divinity itself. It is the first creation to come about in a manner of yesh mi ayin, creatio ex nihilo, from ayin, nothingness, there comes about a yesh, a definite state of existence. Beriah, however, represents merely the passage of our non-existence. It is a state in creation which cannot yet be spoken of as giving rise to proper existence, definable in terms of form and structure. Yetzirah, formation, is the world of where that which was created from ayin assumes shape and form. The world of Asiyah refers to the completed creation. Understandably, this completed creation is still spiritual, the final world of creation, physical Asiyah, comprising our physical world with all its creatures, comes into being only at a latter stage. Together, these worlds form the Seder, Hishtalshalut, the chain-like order of descent, so designated because just as the lower link in a chain is connected to the highest means of all the interlocking links, similarly in the Seder, Hishtalshalut, the lowest level in Asiyah is connected to the highest level in Atzilut. All the levels interlock and flow from each other. In the course of its descent, from Chokhmah Ilah, supernal wisdom, the highest level in Atzilut, to the physical body, the soul passes through the entire Seder Hishtalshalut, and as stated earlier, this descent produces the various levels of souls, just as gestation causes the drop of semen to be transformed into the child's bodily organs, even to the point where it is formed into nails. After this introduction, we return to the Alter Rebbe's words. B'yir idata mi madrega l'madrega al yedei hishtalshlut ha'olamot atzilut et bria yitzira asiya mi chachmata yitbarech. By the soul's descending by degree, through the hishtalshalut of the worlds of asilut, bria yitzira and asiya, from God's wisdom. Kidchtiv kulam b'chachma asiya, as it is written, you have made them all with wisdom, chachma, i.e. everything emanates from chachma, which is the source of all the hishtalshalut. Nithavu mimenu, nefesh ruach uneshama, shel ame haaretz, u bechute ha'erech. Through this descent, the nefesh, ruach, and neshama of the ignorant and least worthy come into being. Their souls were most strongly affected by this descent, and therefore they are on the lowest level. Similarly, all the various levels of highest and lowest souls are determined by the soul's descent through Ishtalshalut. Some souls are affected to a greater degree, others less. The Alter Rebbe now relates to the second point in the analogy, to our case, just as in the analogy, the nails, the child, are still bound up with their first source through their being constantly nurtured by the child's brain, in the case of the soul. V'im kol zeh odena, keshurot umiyu chadot biyuchud nifla, v'atzum b'mahutan, v'atzmutan harishon, shehi ham shachat, chochma ilah. Nevertheless, notwithstanding the fact that they have already become souls of the lower levels, the soul of the ignorant and least worthy, they, the lesser souls, remain bound and united with a wonderful and mighty unity with their original essence, namely an extension of Chachmi law, supernal wisdom. Ki yenikat v'chayut nefesh, ruach and neshama shel amei haaretz hu mi nefesh, ruach and neshama shel hatzadikim v'achachamim rashi b'nei Yisrael she b'doram. For the nurture and life force of the nefesh, ruach, and neshama of the ignorant are drawn from nefesh, ruach, and neshama of the righteous and the sages, the heads of Israel in their generation. By drawing their nature and life from those who represent the levels of head and brain, all Jews are bound up with their source in Chachmei law, supernal wisdom. Uvezeh yuvan ma'amar, Rabotenu zichronam livracha al pasuk uledavka vo shebechol ha-davik betalmidei chachamim ma'ale alav hakatuv ki'ilu nidbak b'shchina mamash. This explains the comment of our sages on the verse, and cleave unto him, concerning which the question arises, how can mortal man cleave to God? In answer, our sages comment, he who cleaves onto the Torah scholar is deemed by the Torah to have actually become attached to the Shekhinah, the divine presence. This seems difficult to comprehend. How can one equate cleaving to the Torah with cleaving to the Shekhinah? However, in light of the above, this is readily understood. Ki al yedei devika b'talmidei chachamim keshurot nefesh, ruach u'neshama al amei ha'aretz u'miyuchadot b'mat hutan harishon v'sharsham sheb'chochma ilah. For through attachment to the scholars, the nefesh, ruach, and neshama of the ignorant are bound up and united with their original essence and their root in supernal wisdom. Shehu yitbarech v'chachmata echad v'hu hamada kulei. And thereby with God himself, since he and his wisdom are one, he is the knowledge. V'aposhim mordim b'talmidei chachamim As for those who willfully sin and rebel against the Torah sages, how do they receive their spiritual nurture and life? Spiritual life and nurture flow only where there is a desire to nurture and give life. In answer to this, the text continues. Yanikat nefesh ruach and neshama shalahem bibechinat acho rayim shel nefesh ruach in nishmat talmidei chachamim. The nurture of their nefesh, ruach, and neshama comes from the hind part, as it were, of the nefesh, ruach, and neshama of the scholars. Nurture from the hind part can be understood by way of comparison to one who gives an object to his enemy. Obviously not out of a true desire to give, but rather due to some external factor. The grudging reluctance with which he gives will be reflected in his manner. He will turn away from him, tossing the object to his enemy over his shoulder. The same is true in the spiritual sphere when spiritual nurture is given unwillingly. It is described as coming from the hind part of the giver, an external level of nature. Nevertheless, even those who rebel against the sages receive some measure of spiritual nourishment from them. For every soul, without exception, must be bound up with its root and source, as explained earlier. The level of nurture they receive, however, is from the hind part of the souls of the sages. Having concluded that every Jew has a holy soul, which emanates from above, from supernal wisdom, the Alter Rebbe now states that even the quality, the rank or level of each individual soul is determined only by factors from above, spiritual factors such as the soul's above-mentioned descent through Hishtalshalut. No actions of this physical world can determine its quality and rank. The Alter Rebbe makes this statement indirectly by clarifying a quotation from the Zohar, which seems to indicate the contrary. Uma shekatu bezohar uvezohar chadosh sha'ikar taloi shi yikodesh atzmo bishat tashmish davka. As for what is written in the Zohar and in Zohar Chadosh, that the essential factor is to conduct oneself in a holy manner during sexual union. Ma'ashe'en came b'nei ami ame ha'aretz chule, which is not the case with the children of ignorant and their ilk who do not conduct themselves thus. The ignorant, as the Zohar goes on to imply, draw down for the child a soul of a lower level, which seems to indicate that an action occurring in this physical world can in fact affect the soul's level. Not so, declares the Alter Rebbe. The Zohar is not referring to the soul at all, but to the soul's spiritual garment as follows. Hainu mishum she'ein l'cha nefesh ruach u'neshama, she'ein la levush mi nefesh de'atzmut avi v'imo. This is because no nefesh, ruach, and neshama is without a garment, which stems from the nefesh of its father's and mother's essence. V'chol mitzvot she'oseh hakol al yedei oto halvush kulei ve'afilu hashefa shenotnim lo min hashamayim hakol al yedei levush zeh. All the commandments that fulfills our influence by that garment is through the garment that the soul achieves its ability to affect the body and to perform the commandments involving physical matters, even the benevolence that flows from heavens is all given through the garment, because the soul is so strongly bound up with this garment. The Zohar refers to the garment in this context as the person's soul. V'im yikadesh et atzmo yamshich levush kadosh lenishmat beno. Now, if the person sanctifies himself, he will bring forth a holy garment for the neshama of his child, thereby enabling the child to serve God more readily. Va'afilu hi neshama gedola tzricha lekidush aviv chule. However great a soul it may be, it still needs the father's sanctification at the time of intercourse. Aval haneshama atzma hine lifamim nishmat adam gavoha le'en kates ba liyot beno shel adam nivze v'shafach chule. But the soul itself, as distinct from its garment, is not affected by the parent's sanctification. In fact, it sometimes happens that the soul of an infinitely lofty person comes to be the son of an ignoble and lowly person. Kamo shekatav ha'ari zichrona livracha kol ze shiblikute Torah parashat vayera uvetame mitzvot parashat Bereshit. All this has been explained by Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, of blessed memory, in Likutei Torah on Parashat Vayera, and in Tamei HaMitzvot on Parashat Bereshit. Thus, the physical world of which the parents are part can in no way affect the soul's spiritual rank. Even the statement of the Zohar that the essential factor regarding the state of the soul is the holy manner of conduct during the sexual union pertains only to the soul's garment. The soul itself, with all its various levels, emanates from above. To sum up, the soul emanates from above. Happy Hanukkah. This is the end of my video, Tanya, day 50.